Hi everyone, and welcome to the first of our series in our conference around taking action or ticking boxes, and obviously that's to do with sustainable development goals. We're delighted to have you all here. Before we get started, just a little bit of guidance to remind you how we like to engage around our online sessions. The session is being recorded so that people can access it at a later stage or date. We would ask you during the presentations to turn off your microphones and your cameras to reduce the bandwidth pressure. Please feel free to use the chat function as we're going along to ask any questions. We have people manning the chat. We will be putting live captions on, which are available. The closed captions are available within the 48 hours. And we would ask you just to be respectful. We have a range of people joining us today from all over the globe. So we're really keen that there is active engagement and that you take part in the conversations, but that these are also respectful. So we want some active listening. We want some engagement with the presentations and hopefully raises a few questions. So we don't want to take too long, and you don't want to take too long listening to me. So without delaying much further, I'd like to introduce Professor Zoe Robinson. So Professor Zoe Robinson is Professor of Sustainability in Higher Education from Keele University. And today she's going to be talking about response and responsibility, the role of universities, the curriculum and student partnership in a more sustainable future. So we are delighted to have you with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. Now, for those of you joining us to listen, Zoe's going to talk for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we will have time for questions, which will take us up to 3 o'clock. And then we're going to enter the second half of our conference today after a short break, but we'll update you on that at 3 o'clock. So Zoe, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you all, and even better, thank you so much for turning up to listen to what I and others have to talk to you about today. So let me share my screen with you. Hopefully that is working. So yes, it's a long title, and I have got a lot of things that I want to cover over this next 45 minutes or so, but I really also want to make sure that I have time for questions at the end. So my name is Zoe Robinson. I've been at Keele for a very long time. Keele University, as you'll see there, is slap bang in the middle of England, really, if you don't know where it is. And I have, for the past 10 years, I've had a role as the university's Director of Education for Sustainability. And in that role, I have had responsibility for embedding sustainability in the curriculum and the wider student experience. So that's been alongside normal sort of academic responsibilities. I am now the university's director for our Institute for Sustainable Futures, which is a cross-university, predominantly research institute this time, but also linking in with education. So basically, I have sustainability after my title in lots of different ways. So we know that there are lots of societal challenges, and often we quite glibly say education is the answer. But is it? What do we mean by education? This is one of my favourite quotations. I'm going to read it to you in full. It is worth noting that the destruction of the planet is not the work of ignorant people. Rather, it is largely the results of work by peoples with BAs, BScs, etc. Education can equip people to be more effective vandals of the earth. If one listens carefully, it may even be possible to hear the creation groan every year in late May when another batch of smart, degree-holding but ecologically illiterate Homo sapiens who are eager to succeed are launched into the biosphere. So what David Orr is saying here is that actually our education systems are as much to blame for actually the current sustainability crises that we face. And therefore, we need to look long and hard at our education systems and at our higher education systems. There's also another angle that I think that we should consider. So a lot of our students come to university, fair enough, because they think they'll get a degree and they will earn more money. And indeed, the stats suggest that graduates continue to benefit from higher earnings. But actually, there's actually quite a strong link between wealth and between emissions. And actually, the richest 10% of the world is responsible for half of the total lifestyle consumption emissions. So we're creating wealthier, probably more emitting graduates through our work. But also, the future leaders, our future leaders, are at university now. So they say that 3% of people attend university, but they take up 80% of leadership positions. So this is the last chance to give our future leaders a sustainability lens to look at the world through. And we're used to, in higher education, thinking about the employability of our graduates, preparing them for the world of work. But actually, shouldn't we also be thinking about preparing our students for the work of the world? So we have a responsibility as educators, as people who work within higher education. We have a responsibility here. And there is urgency. We know that we are living in a climate emergency. If you've seen any of the headlines over the past couple of days, we are seeing heat waves at both the North and South Pole. The climate scientists are saying we have entered a new extreme phase of climate change earlier than expected. We are in an emergency. And these are the impacts that we are seeing around the world from climate change at just a 1.1 or 1.2 degree rise since pre-industrial times. We see flooding across the world, locally here in Malaysia. We see extreme heat, and that extreme heat is in places that we might view as hot, the Middle East, but also in the Pacific Northwest. The bottom left picture is a cooling station in Canada. This looks like a disaster movie. This was last year during a heat wave in North America. And bottom right, we saw last year so many images around the world with intense wildfires. And we hear that the intensity and the frequency of wildfires is greater than we had been projecting from our climate models. So this is what we're seeing. And this isn't an environmental issue. This is affecting people's lives. These are social, economic, cultural, political issues in terms of the causes of climate change, but also the impacts. But of course, it's not just climate change that we need to contend with, that we need to prepare our students to deal with. We have huge problems in terms of our resource use, our waste management, inequality within countries and between countries. We have problems around food security, access to food in our own countries. And the bottom right represents probably one of the biggest challenges that we have, is that we have so few images and visions of a positive, sustainable future. If we don't have those positive visions, how are we going to work towards it? So, of course, we're all now, familiar with this graphic here of the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals, 169 targets, all that can contribute for everybody to make the world a better place. But that demographic suggests to us that all of these goals are in isolation. But of course they're not. They are all absolutely interconnected. And probably the worst thing that we can do is try and deal with any of these single goals in isolation. Timescales. Severity of issues. So we are much better at dealing with things which are immediately in front of us. For example, COVID-19. We reacted to that. We saw changes in our lives that we didn't think that we would see. But actually, has that been to the detriment of considering the other bigger waves of concern behind. Climate change can often seem a long way away, both in space and time. A lot of climate models go up to 2100 and then they stop. 2100 seems a long time away. Net zero by 2050 is our goal. That can seem a long time away. So let's try and bring those timescales closer. If we imagine that our first year students that we're teaching today, they finish, they have a year off, they start their careers in 2025. Let's say that they work for 40 years. That's going to see them retiring in 2065. Their whole career will see them through this net zero transition and beyond. Imagine our first year students, that they have children and that their children start their careers in 2055. Let's say they then work for 45 years. Well, they will be retiring in 2100. So our students' children, maybe our grandchildren, will be retiring at the end of this century. This is not that far away at all. So let's try and bring these timescales closer to us. So our students will make this transition happen and they will live with the impacts. And we absolutely are in this critical decade for action. So I would very much argue that as people working in higher education, we do have a moral responsibility to prepare our students for the transition ahead and to be part of that transition. But it isn't only a moral responsibility. There is also clearly demand from our student population. So this is a study which has been carried out for over 10 years now by what was the National Union of Students and is now called the Students Organising for Sustainability. And over 10 years, they've done a national survey about skills generally, but within that survey, they've asked some specific questions about views around sustainable development. And the statistics then over this, this survey over 10 years, lots of data points, says 91% of students say they agree that their place of study should actively incorporate and promote sustainable development. So this is something that we need to be embedding in every part of our university. 84% of students would like to see sustainable development actively incorporated and promoted through all courses. So our students are saying that, yeah, they want this, they want to see this happening through all the courses. And of course, there's also lots of other activity of young people actively championing for more sustainability within education systems, whether that's in the school system or university systems. And we see students out on the street and young people out on the street saying that they care about these issues as well as wanting to see it reflected in their places of education. But it's not just the students, employers want this. We've seen how close this sustainability net zero transition is. All employers are having to grapple with these issues. Every job is and will be a green job. Everybody has to understand how this relates to their place of work and their professions. So we are also addressing our employability goals as a university if we address sustainability. And of course, this all then leads to what I would like to think is the most important target of the Sustainable Development Goals, if it was a competition. And this is target 4.7 under quality education, a goal which underpins all other goals, which is in making sure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. And this is what the field of education for sustainable development is all about. And there's some very useful guidance and resources out there to support people working in this area. And just to sort of look at this quote from this guidance from Advanced HE and the QAA, It's saying society's facing a future that looks entirely different to what has gone before, and that needs to be reflected in our higher education systems. Our education sector has a key role to play in this. So that is what we are trying to achieve through Education for Sustainable Development, to really help shape our higher education systems to address these challenges. So Education for Sustainable Development is about empowering learners to take informed decisions and responsible actions for the breadth of sustainability issues. I love this part of the definition, which says it achieves its purpose by transforming society. And actually, that's what can get me up in the morning, is thinking the work that I do is ultimately about transforming society for the better. And so ESD is about supporting our students and staff to develop the knowledge, competencies and ability to pursue sustainable visions of the future. It's about supporting students and staff to appreciate the complexity of our world, its wicked problems that emerge, and how they can contribute to positive change across the personal and professional spheres. And it's about challenging, supporting and enabling students and staff to co-design solutions and drive change for sustainability. And we can do so much of this within our jobs. This document very much talks about thinking around a competency approach for sustainability and the skills and the competencies that our students need to develop in order to be able to contribute to these societal challenges, whether this is systems thinking competencies, future thinking or anticipatory competencies, critical thinking, strategic competencies, collaboration, integrated problem solving, self-awareness and awareness of others and other perspectives, but all understood within the context of sustainability and sustainability challenges. So Education for Sustainable Development, it's very easy to sort of take an approach of going, oh, it's yet another thing that we have to add into all of the things we're supposed to do. But it's not a separate agenda. It's a whole approach to look at everything else that we do. It links with all of these other agendas that we're all used to working within. And critically there, we have one of those areas of students as partners. And that is very much the focus that I now want to go on to look at. And so thinking about the journey of our students through our educational institutions. Again, it's very easy to think about students just learning from the formal curriculum. When I wrote my job description as the Director of Education for Sustainability, I was very keen to make sure that it was around responsibility for embedding sustainability in the curriculum and the wider student experience. Because our students don't just learn from the formal curriculum and what they're taught, they learn from the co-curriculum and the opportunities that they have to get involved in different activities. But they also learn from the hidden or the subliminal curriculum. What are the implicit messages that they are taking away from the environment in which they are living and studying? And so when we think about education for sustainable development within our universities, we should be thinking about all of the whole student journey and the whole student experience within our institutions. It's also very easy to take an approach and say, well, I can see this link between my discipline and this bit of sustainability. So that's great, I'm doing it. I'm ticking that box, I'm doing it. But really, we should be asking ourselves critically about whether our students are gaining a very holistic and broad understanding of sustainability from their curriculum and how it links to their curriculum and professional lives. And so previous guidance on education for sustainable development included the sort of pillars of global citizenship, environmental stewardship and social justice. we carried out some work, this is back in 2015, asking our students from sort of different discipline areas what bits of sustainability they felt were relevant to them. And I thought there were some quite striking things to take away from this, such as our health students didn't see the relevance of environmental stewardship. And yet we know the NHS has a huge environmental footprint, but also there are such strong links between environmental issues, or what environmental issues, is it really environmental, something like climate change, and health. Many health practitioners are saying that climate change is the biggest issue in the future for health. And yet our health students weren't seeing that. And so that then helps us identify a gap, you know, in ensuring that actually we're not just doing the easy bits, the social justice, global citizenship, which has traditionally been in the curriculum, but we're really looking at sustainability in a broad way. Similarly, you know, I'm slightly concerned that our natural scientists, well, actually they're not really seeing the relevance of many aspects of sustainability. But you know, it would really worry me if our natural science students were graduating and they didn't see the relevance of their work to social justice. So we need to view these as motorbike going past. We need to view sustainability and ensure that it's covered in a holistic way within our work with students. Okay, I will now go on to say a bit more about some specific examples of work that we have been doing at Keele University. So just to give a bit of a time scale, we've probably had a bit of a sustainability focus as a university since around 2008, when our council sort of made a conscious, you know, decision, recorded, minuted, that we would follow as a university a deep green path in everything that we do, including our use of our campus. A critical sort of moment was probably actually creating a role, giving someone responsibility for trying to embed sustainability within the education activities of the university. Now, fortunately, I had that role. I think that the crucial thing was the making of that role, giving legitimacy for someone to go and have these conversations with people, making staff realise that this was something that was expected of them. We also made sustainability one of our key strategic aims, one of 6. Unfortunately, that isn't our strategic plan anymore, but I still like to refer to that one. Apparently, we don't need to have it as a key strategic aim anymore because we're doing it. Bit of a shame. And so, but these have been key sort of moments where we've been, as a university, really sort of trying to make the case that this is important. And leading to this approach where I like to think about having a Trojan mouse of sustainability, which it scuttles into lots of different parts of the university, leaving little sustainability messages / droppings around, and some of those droppings will fertilise over time. And so we haven't really taken an approach of going, this is our big flagship sustainability project and putting a load of resource into it. It's been much more of a trying to embed sustainability into everything that is going on. And my job, I've very much seen, has been trying to keep an ear to the ground, to listen in to what is happening, to understand what changes are happening, what new policies are coming, because it's much easier to get the change that you want when you stick it onto change which is already happening. And the other key element to our approach is communication. And we work really hard to ensure that sustainability is consistently communicated at a high level, so that every year when our Vice-Chancellor does his State of the Nation address to the whole university, we make sure that sustainability is a key part of that messaging, as well, of course, as lots of other ways too. And so I'm very much a fan, not of thinking that we need to sort of bring all of this stuff together and we need to know what's going on. The thing that makes me happiest is when I suddenly learn that a colleague in another bit of the university has been driving some amazing sustainability activity. And that's much better than it all being centralised, in my view. But we can try and seed that activity through these different approaches. The other thing that's really important to me is to make sure that we don't ever see education in its own silo. And, you know, I hate this division between research and education, which seems to be sort of being driven in many of our institutions, because there are really strong synergies between what we're trying to achieve in our education work, with our research, with our outreach and partnerships, and through our campus. And so actually, education for sustainable development should be intertwined through all of those three other aspects as well. So let's move on to talking a bit more about partnerships with students. So one of the things I'll start by saying is that the curriculum is important, and the curriculum has not just obviously a role in terms of you embed sustainability in it and all students might sort of get that coverage. But the curriculum can be really important in terms of seeding ideas for students to take away and drive and empower them to do other things. So, for example, for about 13 years, we've run a module called Greening Business, Sustainability and Employability. There we are. I thought I'd get some buzzwords in when I wrote that module specification. I was lucky to get a bit of external funding to make it happen. And it's a module which is available to all first-year students in the university. And the reason that it has a business focus, my thinking was, that if all of our students will hopefully go on to work in some way, sustainability is relevant to all places of work, and therefore this is a module where we can make these clear links going sustainability is relevant to you. And so we've run this module for, say, 13 years. A key part of it is our students work in partnership with some of our internal teams, so our environmental manager, our head of grounds. They've also worked with our bookshop, with our events and catering head on different sustainability projects. And the students, they go away, they research, they make recommendations back to our professional staff in the university. Now, what we then were sort of hearing from students was actually they'd really enjoyed doing that, but it was a first year level, and there's only so much that they felt they could achieve when they were in their first year, but they wanted something in the third year. And so that led us to develop another module called Sustainability Consultancy, which is basically greening business, but now students work in groups with external partners on external partner-led projects. And it was brilliant. This morning I had a group of my students who've been working with a fuel poverty charity. They produced a report, and the charity thought it was so good that they wanted them to present those results to this local warmer homes partnership with about 80 different individuals and organisations. So real win-wins are possible. Our students are learning from real people, real organisations, real projects, and putting their time into something which can make a real difference to organisations. But actually, one of the most important things that the Greening Business module has done in the past has empowered students to think that they can drive change, as well as develop their reflective thinking and self-awareness and their collaboration skills. One of our other sort of key approaches is to try to never say no to a student. If a student comes to myself and the very small team that I used to have, currently vacant positions, if students come to us and say that they have an idea around a sustainability project, we really don't want to say no, because that is the most disempowering thing that they could have at this point in their lives. So we really try and support their ideas. And one such idea came about 12 years ago, the first cohort of students studying a brand new degree called Environment and Sustainability. And so this degree brought together students who are passionate about sustainability. They'd often had to fight against people who said they should be doing a more traditional subject. They found themselves, and ideas are being catalysed. And ideas were being catalysed through the Greening Business module. And this group of students came to myself and a colleague, and they said that they didn't feel they could live as sustainably as they would like to in university halls, halls of residence. And so they wanted to turn one of the small bungalows on campus that housed 4 people. They wanted to turn one of these bungalows into an exemplar of sustainable student living, and to use that to explore sustainable living themselves, but also to help educate other students as well. So we supported the students to lobby the university to get this project off the ground, and amazingly, the university said yes. And so this is a project which has now been running for 12 years, with 4 new students every year in the Sustainable Student Bungalow. They've built raised beds, they've got funding and built a polytunnel. They do a lot around sort of communal eating and sort of vegan sort of food. They also are often a sort of a hub for other sort of conversations around sustainability. And those conversations have led to other projects. So another year, a group of students said that they were sort of frustrated that they couldn't get access to organic veg easily on campus. And for us, it's it's a bus ride down into town to get to a supermarket. And so these students came up with the idea of setting up their own organic local fruit and veg bag scheme. So effectively they set up their own social enterprise, which they did, and it ran for a number of years. They wanted to expand into also selling dried goods, and that idea of selling dried goods eventually transformed into actually a permanent installation of our zero waste shop, which sits within the Students' Union. Another initiative which has been sparked off by students is our Great Donate, which again has been running for a good few years. And this really came about from some illegal skip diving students who were just, again, they were frustrated by the fact that they were seeing skips in the university with things in them that they just felt shouldn't be there. And that they started to collect things out of skips. That then led to them kind of lobbying the environmental manager to set up a scheme to collect food, kitchen equipment, clothes that students would normally just have dumped at the end of the academic year, and to then make those items either available through food banks immediately or available to new students coming in the next year. So really sort of helping particularly international students who've travelled with one suitcase and need to restock, but they don't need to go and buy a load of cheap new stuff, because actually we're able to provide through what has been collected the previous year. So again, another example, absolutely sort of student initiated, because they were frustrated, but they also felt empowered and then supported to really drive change, which have then become part of the university structures. So we also work very closely with the Students' Union. One of the schemes that we've sort of set up, and it sort of died a bit during COVID, and we're trying to sort of re-establish, is a sustainability staff student voice rep scheme. So to sit alongside the usual staff student voice reps, with students formally reporting sort of back on their courses, to specifically train some students up around sustainability, so that they could sort of understand how to look at sustainability in their curriculum and their experience, and then to feed that back and to demand more if that's what the demand was. We also do a lot of work with the Students' Union around raising awareness around sustainability issues and making sure that it continues not to be thought of as just recycling. And this is involved, we always work with the new sabbatical officers, although increasingly we don't need to because they just come sort of so engaged in this area. We provide sustainability training for all of the student society committees. We do sustainability training for all of the student voice reps. We embed it within the induction materials that students get. And there's also been a sustainability stripes scheme for societies who could do specific sustainability actions to get a sustainability stripe. Another of the things we try and do is make sure that we celebrate the action of our students. And actually, I was just trying to bring this together. There's another student who I haven't actually added on here. But over the past sort of 5 or 6 years, a lot of our students have actually won or been recognised in national awards for their activism. And I'm so proud of the fact that our students are real activists in this area. Now, all of this, it all might sound great. It comes with its challenges. And to be honest, I get a bit bored of just sort of talking about all the positive things. We also need to talk about the challenges. So, there have been real tensions for students over time. The students who set up the Keele Food Co-op, they were definitely not going to classes because it was taking up so much of their time. We've also had issues of different student factions, internal politics that inevitably arise around, any community sort of driven activity. There's also issues around the private versus the public sphere of student life. So the Sustainable Student Bungalow project, for me, wow, this is an amazing project. Oh, amazing research project. Oh, it'd be really interesting to find out more about how your purchasing habits have changed. Our students told us pretty quickly they didn't want any of that. And actually that made me realise that this was their private lives rather than a public project. And so managing sometimes those tensions between the public and the private in students' lives in universities, I think is really important and something we should talk and think about more. There's also always issues around continuation and student transience. Our students aren't here long. They set up amazing schemes and then they leave, and new students, they might have new ideas that they want to take forward. There's also, a challenge of, well, what are our students learning and taking away from this? How do we help them reflect to truly learn and not just take action? Then we've also had a real challenge about the impact of COVID. We've really lost our student community over COVID times. And it's now, it's a challenge for new students to connect with others who are interested in this area. So we're having to step in again as a university and try and create those spaces to help the students find each other, to catalyse these conversations and ideas. There's always a challenge of moving beyond the usual suspects to make sure that it's not just environmental students who are driving these activities. And of course, there is also challenges around staff time and, I'm sorry to say, sometimes staff attitudes towards students and, sometimes a jadedness of what our students might do. There are, of course, real solutions to these. And, as long as we're aware of the challenges, we can work with them. So thinking about how we can embed some projects into university practices, for example, the Great Donate, the Way to Go shop, student catalyse, they have a permanent legacy of what our students did. We need to try and empower our students through the curriculum, give them those opportunities to meet each other, to catalyse ideas. We need to help them develop intuitive, reflective practices through the curriculum. We need to work with existing structures and societies. So going to different societies to try and help them embed sustainability in a broad way. We need to celebrate the action of our students. We need to be respectful and sensitive to them. And sometimes we just need, as staff, to let go and let students just run with things, or just to drop things and realise that some projects, they just have a finite life, but something new will come along. So I really like to advocate this idea around activist learning, encouraging and empowering our students to be activists in their lives, in their universities, and through doing that, they will develop this range of competencies. And so at this point, I would like to really make a call to action. So first of all, sustainability is not primarily an environmental issue. I'm by background a geographer, an environmental scientist, and I actually spend most of my time now trying to say to people, these aren't environmental issues. Because I think for too long, we've seen some of these issues, they've been labelled as environmental issues, and that has allowed people to go, oh, that's those people over there, that's their concern. Actually, they're not environmental issues, they're social, political, cultural issues. There is a role for environmental scientists, but we all need to embrace these. So sustainability is not primarily an environmental issue. It is not, I think, a political ideology. Discuss. It is not distant from us in time. It is not distant from us in space. So many of the impacts, those images I showed were from around the world. I could just as easily have brought up a whole range of images from our own country as well. And so education, addressing sustainability through education is a moral necessity, I believe. It is urgent. It is complex. It is fast moving. It is exciting. It's not just through the formal curriculum. It is linked to other educational agendas that we're already engaged in. And it is our responsibility as educators. And so we should, as individuals, inform ourselves, keep informing ourselves. We need to keep learning about this. I know my thinking is constantly developing. My narratives around this are constantly developing as I continue to learn and think. We need to be willing to change as individuals. We need to change what we do, change how we think. We need to be willing to collaborate, not compete with each other. We need to think about our role and our responsibility and think about, why do we do what we do? What is our responsibility as educators? And so in our teaching, we need to focus on solutions rather than just focusing on problems. We need to embed action and activism into our teaching. We need to seek to empower our students. We need to not just tinker around the edges, and we need to say yes to student ideas. As researchers and scholars, we need to make our research accessible. We need to work with our local communities. We need to integrate our students into this work, and we need to link our students to real projects and partners. And as institutions, we need to allocate appropriate time and workloads to support active partner-led education. We need to change our governance and strategy, and we need to strive to be the leaders that we say we are. And we need to make it everybody's responsibility. So I love the fact that this conference has the strapline of SDGs. How do we know if we are taking action or ticking boxes? So how do we know? Well, we need to keep asking ourselves this question. We need to question our metrics of success, because probably what is important is not easy to measure. And so we shouldn't just be focusing on what is easy to measure. And we should value the impact on the individual as well. And think, yeah, if we have one individual student who is now thinking differently, doing things differently, then that has been worthwhile. And that will not be picked up in the metrics. And so I will leave you with my final quote. The science demands it. The evidence is before you. We must start at once. There is no time to lose. Thank you very much.
Zoe, That was amazing. Thank you so much. I have a million thoughts going around in my head. As a geographer myself, I cannot agree with you more about the comments you made about this not just being an environmental issue. I was also fascinated that you picked up on the tension between the private and the public life of students. Not something I'd given a lot of thought to, but so important, obviously, to come out in your work. Now, we have time for some questions. There is one that's come up in the chat that I'm just going to talk to first. And then if other people, either you can put your hand up, put your camera on if you'd like to ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. So this first question is about students who take part in these initiatives. Are they generally all from one faculty, or do you find that it's a mix across the areas of discipline that you have at Keele?
A good question, and to be honest, I don't think it's one that we have cracked yet. In terms of a lot of the initiatives that I talked about were driven by students who are studying one of our environmental or sustainability focused courses. That said, there is a lot of activity driven by other students as well. So if we look at our medicine school, they have been very active in driving what's called the planetary health scorecard, completely sort of independently. And so, you know, as a group of students, they have driven things themselves. We've worked with nursing students who came back from placement, and suddenly, you know, this realization of the poverty that people were in, and she wanted to set up a beauty bank, and we helped her set that up, which ran for a number of years. And we work quite actively with a whole range of other societies. I don't think there's as much crossover between disciplines as there could be. And, you know, one thing that we are constantly sort of thinking about and trialing is how do we create those spaces to bring students from all different disciplines who are interested in these issues sort of together, and again, try and catalyse.
Oh, there we are.
That thinking.
Sorry, well, I certainly lost you for a bit there. I don't know if others did. Might just have been me. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask of Zoe? Oh, it was just me, apparently. That's because I'm on campus and the network's appalling. Any other questions that people would like to ask? Yes, Karen.
Keep on clicking buttons. Hi, Zoe, good to meet you. Having some experience of running student partnership projects, I wonder how you keep yourself motivated. I know that I have huge problems with keeping staff motivated because of that transient thing that you were talking about, that it's just constant, and it never gets to a stage where it runs itself. So how do you keep yourself motivated without, you know, drinking a lot?
Oh, it's a great question. I have to admit that yesterday I was having a bit of a grumpy day, and actually I found myself watching a Steve Jobs video, which was all about actually thinking about what we do and why we do it. And so I actually, you know, I talk a lot about saying we should think about our responsibility. And when I'm feeling grumpy, or you just go, oh, again, to really try and think about, actually, you know, it's a privilege to have our roles. We have a responsibility, but in some ways to celebrate the fact that we do have this constant sort of turnover of new students that we can work with, that we can learn from, and actually that real sense of sort of maternal pride that I get from my students when you see them develop, you see some of the fantastic things that they run, and you know, it's almost consciously just trying to make yourself think about some of those things, because yeah, it's exhausting, because you're right, you know, that there's a constant battle to keep things going, and this is why I also sort of think that just letting go sometimes is fine, and you know, some projects they have their time, and so let them go, and something else will grow in that space as well.
Thanks very much. Zoe. You're inspirational. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Karen, as well. Absolutely fabulous, and it sort of, I suppose, touches on that thing about between public and private as well, which I just haven't really thought about. Wei, you'd like to come in with a question?
Yeah, just a quick question about your sustainability modules you talked about. You said it's open to the whole university. Is it a lecture room based module teaching, or and how is like taking up of that module across the university?
Yeah, thanks. You know, really sort of practical question. It is open to the whole university. Doesn't mean they want to do it though. So it is, you know, it has been face-to-face teaching. We've had probably our highest cohort has probably been close to 100. Probably tends to be more about 40. In reality, although it's open to all through an open elective system, it's mostly either geography environment students on the one hand, or business students on the other hand, and the business students think it's too environmental, and the environmental students think it's too businessy, which probably means it's about right, and there'll be a smattering of other students. But actually we're stopping that elective system, and we're actually moving to something called global challenge pathways, where students sign up to a pathway that they will follow at levels 1, 2 and 3. And we will have a pathway which is called climate change and sustainable futures, and that will actually largely be online, and we're expecting much higher numbers on those. But I think the problem is with online, it's much harder to create that community, and actually that is the important, it's providing those spaces for students to find each other and excite each other with ideas.
Yeah, we are thinking about, well, Claire knows, we are thinking about major minor degree. So maybe that's similar to your pathway arrangement.
Yeah, I tried to establish a sustainability minor in 2016. We don't have one. I will not say anything more.
Yeah, I suppose, I wonder, does online, how do you encourage activism through online?
Yeah, good question. I'll let you know, because our level 5 or second year module in this new global challenge pathway has a focus on activism, and so, you know, it will be based around trying to excite and empower students to really think about what matters to them. You know, what do they want to see different, what frustrates them? And I think that's what's key to all of this sort of activism. It's, you know, it's where students they've been frustrated by something, they've seen something that they've wanted to change, but we've given them a bit more of a structure to make it happen beyond their illegal skip diving. So I think it can be done online. And actually, you know, in a way, I'm aware that in my professional life, you know, I am now collaborating with so many people online, and you can form relationships, and it is part of the professional world we now work in. So I actually think, you know, helping our students to develop those skills and ability to do exciting stuff online, you know, it's not a second best. You know, actually, we need to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Yes, and just as an observation, we have, well, we had 80 at one point, but we have 76 people on this presentation at the moment from all over, all around the world. We would never have that reach or that input to our conversations and discussions before we adopted this type of approach to engaging around these important discussions. We have time for one more question before we take a break, before our second half. Are there any other comments or thoughts, observations or questions that people would like to make? I'm not seeing anything. Oh, yes, please come on in.
The student empowerment, is there some particular strategy to facilitate it, for example, in a curriculum or?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's that the curriculum is a really important place to do it. And, for us, it's been sort of setting up projects. And so, with first years, students, we've spoken to different sort of professional services around the university who've said, we would like this to be done. But then we give students the opportunity to sort of develop that a bit in the way that they're interested, so they're not just sort of responding to do this exactly. So kind of trying to, scaffold a bit of them feeling that they are doing change and contributing to change and being listened to within the curriculum, I think can then make them think, they also then develop relationships with people in the university, in the sort of other staff who they then feel that they can go to with their ideas. And so we can help make those connections and bridge, that complete, as a student, you have no idea who to talk to. So we can help bridge that through the curriculum as well.
No, thanks, Zoe. There's one more question in the chat, which we'll close with, if that's okay. A question about, would there be any scope to involve colleagues involved in digital technologies or media to contribute to ESD within or across modules?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, interestingly that you pick up on media, because I think that communication element is absolutely critical. I'm really delighted. I've just appointed someone as a deputy director in the institute that I run, who's an expert in environmental communication. And I was like, this is so important, as is understanding how to use digital technologies effectively. So, and it is the world that we work in. And so many, coming at it as a geographer, environmental scientist, so many jobs actually involve some element of communication that we have thought that we don't need to embed within our curriculum. And I think this probably goes for every job that tends to, so many jobs, a communication element, which we haven't traditionally thought is part of those professions, but it is. So yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you, Zoe. That has been absolutely inspiring. My head is buzzing with the ideas because, as Wei pointed out, we're starting to think about some of these issues around sort of major minor pathways and where sustainable development goals sit for us as a university. So I have loads I've written loads of notes. Where we're at in the program for today is we're sort of halfway through. We want to continue the partnership theme, and we have 3 presentations coming up in the second hour that all look at partnership with students from both our own institution here in Queen's Belfast, but also from Manchester. So what I'm going to propose, my clock is saying 2:58 at the moment. I'm going to stop for 2 minutes. I'm going to put off my camera and my mic. I'll be back, bang on 3, and we'll start again. So what I'm suggesting is people stand up and have a wee stretch of their legs, take a comfort break, put the kettle on if you want to, and we'll be back very shortly. Speak to you all soon. Hi, Jennifer. Jen. How are you?
There we go. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. The sun's out here in Belfast. It's lovely.
Likewise here, uncharacteristically so for Manchester.
Although I would say that our offices in CED are above the Student Union bar, so it's a little noisy. I've had to close the window.
Possibly handy too for when we're finished.
Absolutely, absolutely. Are you okay with your slides and everything?
Yes. Can I put them up now? Is that, or would you prefer me to wait a moment?
You're more than welcome to put them up. Yes, you're more than welcome.
Actually, I will if you don't mind. Forgive me. I'm less familiar with Teams. Yes. Okay. I'll just put that up. Can you see that?
I can see that. That's great.
Lovely. Thank you.
Just going to, can I ask my colleagues whether people are back in? Tracy, Karen?
Yeah, I'd say go ahead, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, so for the second part of our conference this afternoon, we're continuing with the theme of partnership. Where we have, as I said, 3 presentations. So we're starting off with Jen O'Brien from the University of Manchester, who's looking at University Living Labs. And then at 3:15, we have Maryam, Malekigorji and Keynote Clerkin from Queen's University, who are going to be looking at student-staff partnership project that they have. And then at 3:30, we have an evaluation of a co-designed evidence-based practice module that's underpinned by UDL, and that's being presented by Dr. Gary Mitchell and Professor Christine Brown-Wilson from the School of Nursing and Midwifery. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jen. Please feel free to use the chat again, as usual, and we'll kick off and get going. Thank you so much, Jen. You are more than welcome. We're delighted to have you here.
Oh, thank you ever so much for such a wonderful, warm welcome. And good afternoon, everybody. Forgive me, I cannot possibly have asked for a better contextual setting than Professor Robinson's opening to today to frame what is a very real offer for partnership today. It struck me that today I'm going to talk a little bit about University Living Lab as a broader concept, a way of working with students, absolutely deploying education for sustainable development, being inspiring, empowering and equipping, transforming society, but also today very practically offering you a Trojan mouse of sustainability, an analogy that I've heard before, and Zoe, you know I love it and it will stay with me for a long time. It did occur to me that I've just likened 10 years of my working career to mouse dropping, so you can take that in any way that you wish. But let me share with you today a little bit about our University Living Lab and how you can be part of it. So forgive me, I'm assuming that we're all here today as a self-selecting sample of people who are aware of the SDGs, and Living Labs are often seen as a part of a way of deploying them. Labs themselves are far from new. They're defined in various different ways depending upon how people are using them. But at their heart, as I'm trying to exemplify there, they're about universities working with external organisations to effect change. And my personal critique of the labs has always been the lack of consideration of the roles of students within this space. So we focus a lot about our research, we focus a lot about public engagement, working with external organisations, but less about our students. And as I'm going to come to in a second, scale there, I confess I'm also a geographer, scale is key, but scale is really quite significant. Furthermore, there's a huge body of literature that talks about students as partners. And again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, this diagram from HE, or now Advanced HE, about the benefits of working in partnerships with students. And again, a further critique that I would add is, while we're thinking about the benefits of working with students, to institutional learning, to degrees, to the subject, again, we don't think about the powers of our students to go out and affect change beyond the academy in, dare I say it, the real world. And that's very much the niche that we are trying to fill today through our University Living Lab. So our lab itself is a platform. And what we are doing is linking together applied research between organisations and our students to affect change. The niche that I would argue that our lab is filling is that we are using what we already have. Now, there are some fantastic projects out there that link together external organisations with our students. So Zoe referenced the Sustainability Consultancy, for example. I can't not reference Scott and Helena at Strathclyde with their vertically integrated project sustainable development. The NUS had Dissertations for Good. They're all fantastic, amazing projects, but they are resource heavy. They're really quite bound in bureaucracy, perhaps. And also, I would argue, they are something else that you have to do. Not all of our students have the luxury to undertake additional work. Perhaps they're carers, perhaps they're part-time, perhaps they're distance learners or they're commuters. They need, I would argue, to have opportunities to affect change through their learning. And if our students are doing assessment anyway, if organisations need research, why not bring the two together and do something useful? It's almost a circular economy approach. And that's what we're trying to do. And this, as I referenced to you earlier, is where the scale is actually really quite both empowering and slightly paralysing at times, if I'm honest with you. So at my own university, we have 40,000 students. If just half of them spent a quarter of their time studying in and around sustainability problems, we would generate 7.5 million hours of research time annually that we could focus on tackling these wicked problems that Professor Robinson very kindly outlined for us earlier on. You scale that up to the global numbers of students expected to be in HE by 2025, and that is nearly 40 billion hours of research time that we could focus onto these problems as part of students' degree learning. So it's already part of their day-to-day assessed degrees. And that's absolutely what we are doing. I've been running this approach now for the best part of 10 years. If it's not too arrogant, I think with quite a lot of success and real impact, so I'll evidence to you momentarily. It's been a labour of love that I would love to offer to you. Please use this model if you think it could be useful. The way it works, and it's deliberately designed to be really light touch. So organisations set the research that they need to affect change. Our projects are framed around the SDGs, and I love that. So often a student will say to me, no, I'm not really into environmental topics. I don't do climate, I don't do carbon, but they might do gender equality. They might do questions of social justice. And as was framed earlier, all of this links back to these broader challenges of sustainable development and sustainability. Students, due to their breadth, can adapt these projects to any, I would argue, disciplinary perspective, and indeed at any scale. So essentially we have a database of projects that students can adopt, adapt and tweak for their own work. They then undertake that research. And what's been really lovely here is that often organisations will say, I need a mathematician or a physicist, where in actual fact there's a gendered perspective to climate change, for example. It might be that we need to think about accessibility of particular policies. And that's where the different disciplinary nuances of our students, or indeed interdisciplinary team working, offers that real richness to external organisations and even sometimes challenges their own perspectives. It's also lovely because our students have access to this vast, perhaps more than they appreciate, set of resources, the policy documents, the journals, the time that they have. Increasingly now we're receiving projects from the global north and from very small NGOs, from the global south even, get my geography right. I had a wonderful one from a tiny NGO in Tanzania the other day, an organisation that essentially rescues women from arranged marriages, and they're looking at ways in which they can offer skills training. And they came to me and said, oh, I need a strategy around this. I don't know what other organisations are doing. So they've constructed that into a project. Students are undertaking it as part of their research, as part of their degree programmes. That is then marked by the course leaders. And then the students then, once it's marked, return their research back to our platform and we link it through to the organisation. In time, and it can take time, the organisation links back to us examples of any impact that they have made through the students' research. And this platform can be used for any degree, I would argue, any learning. We have dropped it in as assessment, the whole assessment on courses, but indeed it can just be a database of inspiration for students to go to do some useful essay writing for their courses. And the impact that we have had already has been wonderful. So we've had students' work presented at the Rockefeller Centre in New York, for example. Lots of our students have fed into the Manchester City Council's Zero Carbon 2038 policy. But this is the example that I always reference. There's a really big swanky office block being built just around the corner from us. two of our students undertook research into the possibility of having beehives within this building. And I love it. I had received this email the other day when the big development organisation said, you know, we've just built in 2 bubble beehives into this building. And I love it. Keystone of biodiversity, absolute symbol of Manchester. This would not have been part of the building if it hadn't have been for our students' research, which was a part of their standard degree learning. What I've also found, again, referring back to Zoe's Trojan mouse of sustainability, is it's prompted a broader shift in the way in which we are learning with students, we are working with students, and then affecting our policy. So this idea of students becoming empowered by working together with us, we constructed this model in consultation with our students and with external organisations all the way through. And we've begun to see ways in which our students have built on this empowerment and this excitement. So I received an email from Alexis one morning going, "Hiya, Jen, I'm just on the way to Ghana to enact the piece of research that I undertook for my course through the Living Lab. Got any advice?" Mixed feelings at that moment in time, and quick reply in terms of this is not official university business, but how wonderful. And what I particularly liked is Alexis went out with an idea of a project, got there and said, actually, no, I need to talk, I need to listen, I need to build these ideas with the community. Quite a few students that were part of this model were the original founders of our What Not Waste shop, and they've spoken really positively about how they incorporated ideas, and I'm working with them at the moment to build some Living Lab projects that will feed back into the shop. Another one of my students, Frankie, built a most incredible Instagram feed where she is sending out really key, broadly speaking, sustainability messages through her Instagram outlook. So a real partnership with students that extends above and beyond their direct link with the labs. And this came back to this wonderful feedback that I received of students saying that they felt valued. We built this with them, we're working with them all the way through. Often students will then link me to organisations that they know of that could benefit of some research time. And it then generated this Living Lab approach where we saw this broader shift in thinking, in living, in researching, and finding out together. And it's led to some real positive examples as well. So one of my student partners, Emin, she's just achieved her associate fellowship. She's a final year undergraduate at the moment. And I am presenting at the Higher Education Academy with Andreas, a second year management student as well, built upon working together through this particular approach. And just to further the impact that we've had, so generally speaking, students really enjoy this approach. They like the idea that it is real world, because of course the academy is not real world, is it? But this is a real world assignment that feels like it's real when you're engaging through this process. It is, of course, a way in which students can enhance their employability in a really accessible way. Again, drawing upon the fact that not all of our students can necessarily undertake co-curricular or extracurricular activities. So many of our students have been employed by the organisations that they did their research for. So it's a great way that organisations can talent capture and nurture. And many others have attributed their employment to this opportunity. So talking about the skills that they have gained through this experience that has then gained them their employment. Generally, they've fed back as well about how much they've enjoyed working with us. So really feeding along into this process, as I say, helping us to source projects and helping us to develop the lab as well. Our University Living Lab is an experiment within itself, and regularly students will advise how we can better promote it or develop it along the way. The other bit that's been really interesting to me as well is referring to the earlier comment of it being a Trojan mouse of sustainability. Apologies, Professor Robinson, I think we're all going to use that analogy quite regularly. Is it's begun to prompt or catalyse, if you like, a broader shift to how we as an institution work. So it's a really safe and quite general way in which you can start to move learning, operations, procurement even to some extent, as we have some of our students working with our internal sectors as well, to think about ways in which we can generally work together in a more mutually beneficial sharing of knowledge and expertise approach. So Manchester City Council were an early and very much appreciated partner within this project. And they were good enough to say that it was one of the ways in which they began to rethink their relationships with the university, getting to think a bit differently about how they could then look to other ways in which we can work together. And this is very much fed into my current drive to think about ways in which, yes, we have research-led teaching, but how could we also steer, drawing upon these external influences and ideas, our teaching to feed into our our research? So could our research be better led by our teaching, and indeed then through partnerships with our students going forward? So just to bring that all together genuinely in a very tangible offer today, this is quite a simple approach. It is genuinely meant and deliberately meant to be very, very light touch. This idea of bringing together two needs, the needs of external organisations and then the assessment opportunities of our students. It is a really effective model. We can evidence all sorts of different impact, and it's absolutely scalable. It's designed to do that. It's currently being used at universities across the globe. We started local for obvious reasons, but the global scale opportunities to scale are really tangible. Please, you're most welcome to partner with us. You can drop this model in as key assessment, or indeed feel free to send students to the platform for potential inspiration. Indeed, if you have projects that you'd like to suggest, you could feed into the lab. I will happily work with you to develop them. The lab undertakes quite a lot of the administration, the platform of the lab undertakes quite a lot of the administration that often makes this model inaccessible otherwise or resource heavy. And I'm really happy to share that approach with you. And indeed, if you're working in this area and you're sat there thinking, oh, she needs to do this or needs to do that, I'd be delighted to hear from you as well. I think for me, just to end in my last 30 seconds, what's been really interesting to my mind is that this is a really small scale example that illustrates a much broader ethos of working together in partnership. And that's the way in which, again, the little Trojan mouse has said, OK, we can have impact through our teaching and learning, and then that then ripples out to thinking about our broader approaches of working in a much more mutually respectful and empowering way using Sustainable Development Goals. So as I say, if it could be of use to you at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Okay, I'll end it there. Thank you.
Jen, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I've asked people in the chat to hang off on the questions until we've had all three presentations, and then we're going to pick up questions at the end, if that is okay with you.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now is hand over to Maryam and Kiba, who are here at Queen's, to take us through their presentation next. So Jen, if you're able to stop sharing.
I'm so sorry. This is me struggling on Teams. Thank you to the administrative team. It's just taken over. Thank you.
Okay. And hopefully we can get Maryam and Kiba up.
Thanks, Claire. I think if I share, should be fine. So that will stop the current sharing. Let me try.
Perfect. Over to you.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone. And many thanks for the kind invitation and the time and opportunity to present today. My name is Maryam Malekigorji. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Pharmacy at Queen's University, Belfast, and also acting as program director for the BSc courses we have in the school. So today with my colleague, Dr. Clerkin, lecturer in the School of Pharmacy, she is also acting as the program director with me. We will present together the student staff partnership project that we actually embedded in our BSc courses in China. So before I start, just wanted to highlight what Zoe and Jennifer mentioned already. So as we know, education is at the heart of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and higher education is the key, has the key role in changing the values and attitudes toward education for sustainable development and education for global citizenships. So as educator, we try to continuously change and enhance the quality of our education. And within that regard, in terms of the quality assurance assessment, we do consider student feedback both formally through student, for example, student voice committees, and also the formal survey that we have, such as the teaching evaluation and the module evaluations, as well as the informal communication and feedback we receive from the student throughout our courses. Having said that, as I quoted here from Don, there is a subtle but extremely important difference between an institution that listens to the student and respond accordingly, and an institution that gives the student the opportunity to explore and bring about changes. So as educator, we must change our perspective, and instead of perceiving a student as consumer, we need to support the view of a student being active collaborator and co-producer. So that can create competent and skilled graduates who make informed choices to become autonomous lifelong learners. So this study is undertaken in China Queen's College, or CQC. So CQC is Queen's main transnational project and has around 450 students studying 2 BSc degrees in pharmaceutical sciences and biotechnology, and a foundation year in the north of China, Shenyang. So while CQC was a very successful transnational project embedding the Queen's core value and experience into a student body in China, it hasn't been without its very unique challenges. Our students are all Chinese studying English degrees in an environment where the English is not the first spoken language. And also in the past, they had the majority of their teaching as large group-based teaching with few one-to-one or tutorial-based session. So that has led the development of a very strong hierarchical relationship between the students and teacher, as we commonly known as teacher-based learning strategy. So we wanted to change that, and we knew that our students in the past created a dependency on their teacher, which can limit their knowledge and the ability of fostering lifelong learning skills, such as the development of creativity and original thinking, which are required and critical in professional practices. So in this project that we started since 2019 with student union collaboration, we wanted to offer the opportunity to a student to become self-directed learners, to allow them to self-regulate, to take responsibility of their own learning and become more accountable. So how we implemented the project in our courses. So we normally recruit our students at the beginning of the term. All students enrolled in the modules have the opportunity to undertake the activities in the project, but their participation is not compulsory. So here student reps have a very critical role because they are the one contacting constantly students and staff, communicating with them, collect and analyze feedback, and reflect ideas and suggestions for course enhancement. So the reps receive training at the beginning of the term for a week, and the project is normally introduced to the whole class and students during the first introduction session that we have with all students. So our aim is to embed active learning strategies through formative assessment by considering a student-centered learning approach. And therefore, we request students' feedback, perception, and suggestion by surveys during the project. So the result of the surveys are normally analyzed by the reps. They are circulating the surveys and gathering the information, and then they discuss the outcomes in the focus groups with us, with the staff. So as you can see, there are 2 photos here taken from one of the focus groups we had in 2019. Unfortunately, we had to move our focus group meeting online after the COVID pandemic. So we also created online discussion forum on our VLE canvas. So everyone has the opportunity to contribute as collaborator, and this is the area we post the action points after each focus group. So our discussions and action points in the project is divided into 3 groups: student voice, education, and academic enhancement. And we believe that our students so far have had substantial contribution in decision making and enhancing the quality of our courses. So with the student collaboration, we managed to improve the feedback mechanism we have across different modules in CQC. We managed to improve the way we help the student to prepare themselves for the summative assessment by providing a very robust formative assessment during the term. And also we linked the subject very clearly to the module and program learning outcomes requested by the student, and informed them how different subjects across the same level or at different level are integrated horizontally and vertically. And also these two that are highlighted in red are the changes requested by a student. And the reason that I highlighted them because these were major changes, and we require to submit those changes first to the Queen's Courses and Regulation Groups. They are now approved by them, CRG, and one of them was actually moving some of the formative assessment to the summative assessment to improve student engagement and understanding throughout the course. And also the other one was delivering the module in the first semester instead of the second semester. So that was one of the level 1 module, organic chemistry. And because our students think that they have good background of organic chemistry through their high school, there may not be a necessary requirement to develop some skills ahead of taking this module in the second semester. So that was the second major change that we embedded in one of the modules in CQC. So now I'm going to actually hand it over to my colleague QUB. Thanks, QUB.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more of the detail of what we have implemented into our modules at CQC. So the example that we're going to have a look at is a low risk, what we deemed as a low risk chemistry module in level 1, known as CHC 1004. And just to make note here, I took over this module in this academic year, and so we've seen some changes that we'll discuss now. One of the changes that was fed through our Chinese cohort was that they wanted an opportunity to have a look at some of the terminology before they went into a lecture to familiarise themselves with that. And so we implemented definition tests before each lecture. As you can see highlighted here, we scored it out of 100% before they could move on to the next section of the lecture. But on the second year, if you can go on, Maryam, what we noticed was that students did not like that approach, and to be better in line with UDL, we removed that. So now students only have to actually submit an attempt at those tests. We also included, go on please, Maryam, a recap quiz, and this was again based on the feedback that we were receiving from students. They were asking for more practice. They wanted more attempts to prepare for the class test. So this recap quiz really is a standard for which we would set the class test at, but also for us to use as a diagnostic tool to design our revision sessions and to identify areas that the students may be struggling in. Thank you, Maryam. So if we have a look at some of the impact of this partnership on this module, the first thing to mention, as Maryam has already alluded to, is that due to the pandemic in 2019-20, our exams in this year were online, and so the data and the results that were presented here may not be a true reflection of the students' performance or their satisfaction with the module. But what we can see is that in the subsequent years, our pass rate is around 70% as a first attempt, and that has raised in this year. And we could argue that that could be just to a stronger cohort of students. So we really can't confirm whether that is an accurate representation either. But what we can show is some of the positive, thank you, Maryam, feedback comments that we were receiving upon implementation of this partnership. And they are really, really encouraging for us to implement this partnership into other modules. So some of the comments were learning a subject in a different way, discussion with my peers, which I think we've all talked about today, which is really important to build a community with peers. Understanding the learning outcomes, the module is set clearly, student interactions are great, the time arrangement for different activities is very precise. So these, as I said, are very encouraging to continue the partnership into other modules. It is worth noting here that the students in the 2019-20 cohort, we have monitored their performance in more advanced chemistry modules in level 2 and level 3. But again, because of the impact of the pandemic, those results are not, we can't confirm the data that we've collected from that, but we're hoping with continued monitoring of this partnership that we will see a positive outcome of this partnership. Thank you, Maryam. So what we have done in this academic year is expanded the partnership into some level 2 and level 3 modules. And again, these modules are still running, so we unfortunately don't have data to present to you here today, but what we can say is that the preliminary results are showing that there is a slight improvement compared to previous years in terms of that student satisfaction rate. And again, that's very optimistic for us to implement this across other modules. We do also have a grant application under review to support this partnership at CQC, and hopefully,
just 2 minutes, Kiva, sorry, just on
thank you. Hopefully if that grant is successful, we can help support students from a technological perspective. So that would be, for example, to help students with connectivity issues that they may be facing, but also to support staff in the development of digital tools. Thank you, Maryam. So these are some of the achievements to date, but in summary, what we would just like to say is that the skills that students are developing through this partnership, such as the self-sufficiency, critical thinking, self-learning and self-dependency, are vital for the global workforce and to empower those students to drive real change. And we're hoping that this partnership will help to foster some of those key skills that they require. And then finally, Maryam, we'll just leave you with some quotes. And this is just to show how this partnership has been around for the last 15 years. And what people are really seeing is that a partnership between students and staff should really be the norm. It shouldn't be the exception. We should be continuously listening to our students on how to improve our modules and to effect that change. And we continue to need university support to ensure the success of this partnership, but also the success of our students in their careers, whatever direction that they may see themselves going down. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. That was really, I hear about CQC so often, but don't know much about what goes on. So that's a really useful insight to the activities that you've been undertaking. Again, we're going to leave any questions to the end of the session, if that's okay, and therefore move on to Gary, Dr. Gary Mitchell, I believe. We're hoping to hear
Hi, Claire.
Hi, Gary, and Christine as well. So welcome to you both. This is Dr. Gary Mitchell and Professor Christine Brown-Wilson, who are here to present on their projects that they've been undertaking. And I'll just hand over to you to talk us through it.
That's lovely. Thanks so much. I'm just uploading the slides now. So just let me know when they're there.
We're not seeing your slides yet.
There, I've went mad with the images, so they're coming now. I can see they're about 50% of the way loaded, 75%, nearly there. So hopefully,
that's you.
I'll get some thumbs up or some brilliant, amazing.
You're all go.
Okay, look, thanks so much for the opportunity to present this afternoon. I have applied in previous years to speak at this conference, and I've only ever got to the poster presentation stage. So we must be getting better at what we're doing. So really delighted. I'm going to set my timer because I'm really conscious of time. So here goes. So this project is a a project that I'm leading. My name's Gary. I'm from the School of Nursing. My colleague Patrick, who's not with us this afternoon, is someone that I'm mentoring or try to mentor through this piece of work. And then Christine, who's my colleague, is kind of mentoring us both through it all. So we're all supporting each other as we move through this project, which is really, really nice. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take the first part of the presentation, talk a little bit about the background to the work we're doing, and then talk a little bit about our evaluation and findings, try and keep it light and interesting. And then I'm going to move to Christine at the end, who's going to give the grand finale and the fireworks at the end, Christine, hopefully, and set us off. So the module that we're going to talk about is a module that's undertaken in the School of Nursing and Midwifery. It's been going for many years, and it's around evidence-based nursing. So it's about the nuts and bolts of things that nurses do to help their patients in practice. So how do they find the right evidence at the right time for the right patient? And it's very, very important. It's embedded in our curriculum. But the trouble is that often nurses find this module boring and they find it difficult to relate to their practice because it's not about taking blood pressure. It's not about delivering clinical skills. It's about finding evidence through databases and literature and searches and things like that. So they can find that tough. So that's where we're at. So there's 600 nursing students that undertake this module each year, about 300 in September and about 300 in February. You can see in the background that we've put some photographs, some selfies of them all in their uniform. That's our students. And what we've come to realize is what people have known for a while, that our students, like everyone else, have a diverse range of learning needs. Some are mature students, some are from school, some are from previous jobs in care. All different types of learners. So our goal in this design was to minimize the barriers that might be there and maximize learning for all students on the module. So part one, here's 6 of our students who supported our initial co-design of this module. So I'm going to talk a little bit about co-design. First, if that's okay, how we brought this module together. So the first thing we did was we met with students, we met with service users, they were patients, people with lived experience, and we met with clinicians who were practicing nurses, and we met with academic staff. So we brought those 4 very passionate group of people together with often quite diverse expectations of what the module should look like. And we brought them together to kind of flesh out higher level learning objectives before moving down into what this module should look like. So this module, I should have said, runs over 12 weeks. Over 12 weeks. And I'll get into that in a bit more detail. So it's a 12-week module. So what the staff, the students, the service users, and everyone came back with was they wanted more stuff. So they didn't just want one lecture and one tutorial. They just wanted multiple things going on. So they wanted multiple means of representation. So they wanted lots of ways to acquire information. Some people like to read. They like to get articles from textbooks. Some people did not like to read at all. Some people wanted to watch videos. Some people like to listen to podcasts on the go. Some people wanted things like games and virtual reality. They wanted lots of different ways to acquire their knowledge. More than that, they didn't just want to do everything. They wanted a menu of activities that they could engage with, which meant more work for us, but that's what co-design wanted. In terms of expression, which is the second thing, they wanted to provide alternatives to demonstrating what they knew. So they didn't all want to do a test. They didn't all want to do a reflection. They didn't all want to do tweets to tell us what they knew about the module. They wanted a variety of ways to which they could demonstrate to us that they knew what they were doing. So that led to things like in the module, like games, Twitter activities, discussion boards, just different ways in which students could express their learning to us. And finally, more or less as the module was ending and after it was said and done, because evidence-based practice is such an important part of their practice as future nurses and nursing students, they were very keen that they wanted more learning materials after. They wanted their engagement to be maintained and sustained over time. And we thought, my goodness, what these people seem to want the earth. But really, when we boiled it all down and we really thought about it, it really concorded with this UDL theory of providing multiple layers of representation, multiple means of expression, and multiple means of engagement. So I know you won't be able to see this slide. Hopefully you think it looks nice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and take you through basically the journey of what you're looking at on the slide. So basically this 9-part diagram is how we move through co-design. I'm going to speak to it quite briefly. You don't need to worry about the text. We met with students, service users, staff and clinicians to co-design this. Ben, thank you for your nice comment. It looks nice. And then we got about putting these people together. We met with these people face to face and then online to develop this. We had a variety of really innovative ideas that Christine, myself, Patrick, we can't take credit for because they're really the ideas of co-design. So they wanted things like student champions, which isn't very unique and novel. They happen in other modules. Student champions to take to co-deliver this module, so actually deliver classes with us. They wanted peer support, so they wanted sessions with peer learners that we weren't involved with to help support them with the module. They wanted a feedback portal that was always live, a real-time feedback portal. So that meant that students could provide real-time feedback to us about what was working well and what was not working well. So an example of that was, oh, Gary, your podcasts are good. However, they're quite long. You're quite long-winded. Could you make things shorter? And that meant we could change our delivery in real time for students. It also meant that when we weren't hitting a few areas, like if we were doing too many podcasts, people would say, look, I feel like I'm missing out on podcasts. It's not a way I like to learn. Can you give me alternatives? Can you give me other things to do? So it kept us on track in real time. And we still do this. In terms of the topics, the group picked the 6 topics. Now we came to co-design with an idea of the kinds of things they needed to learn for their curriculum, which is NMC approved. But we allowed them to shape what was delivered, the menu, the order in which the topics were delivered. And I'm just moving on to the next point. So they also wanted to be involved in developing the learning activities too, particularly the students. Service users and staff practice less. The students felt particularly empowered to go on this journey with us. They wanted to help us develop the videos. They wanted to help us develop the podcasts we developed. We developed a game. You can see the image on the left-hand side of the slide, top left. They wanted to be involved in every aspect. They wanted to curate a Twitter account for the module, which still runs. And they also wanted to write the assessment. So we couldn't really let them write the assessment, but we did facilitate them to provide some questions for a question bank for one of our workbook exams. So we provided them with the short workshop on how to write MCQs and what have you. So we had them involved in all processes. In terms of providing extracurricular learning, enriched learning, we have developed a degree plus pathway at the university where students can join active research projects, active evidence-based projects to see how their learning is translated in actual practice. And Christine, that's a bit that Christine will talk about at the end of the presentation, so I don't want to steal that for now. And basically the module seems to be working quite well. People seem to be happy with it, and it's had fairly decent engagement. But what do I know? Not very much, as you would learn if I talk more. So we wanted to put this to the test and do a proper, robust evaluation and try and have a bit of impact. So I'm conscious of time. I'm at 9 minutes, so let me try and move through this quite quickly. We wanted to do a mixed methods evaluation of what we've done because it was an awful lot of work, and we want to make sure that if we implement or change that it's doing right. So we did some questionnaires and we did some qualitative interviews with students, and we went through our faculty ethics committee to make sure we were doing everything appropriate and right. So as you'll see, you can we managed to find 2 validated questionnaire tools, and we got permission to use those. It's a Likert scale that really details someone's attitudes to evidence-based practice, and also not only their attitudes, which hopefully improve after, but also their practice. So do they use what they learn in the module in practice? This is an example of some of the questionnaires. I'll not read through them because I'm conscious of time. but I can make these slides available after. So these are very specific for evidence-based nursing in terms of your knowledge and also the use of it in the ward. So we were delighted to have 380 students who completed pre and post tests. Christine and I can't take credit for the analysis. That was our colleague Patrick who waded through the data. We had about 600 students did the module, so a response rate of about 60% did the test before they did the module and after they did the module. Delighted that we had positive results in the paired t-tests that were highly significant in both attitudes and practice. And so our interpretation is that the module is highly likely to increase student attitude and practice to evidence-based nursing, which is the goal. We also went a bit further and we did 6 focus group interviews with 58 willing students who got no incentive. They just participated because they're good sports. And we had the interview guide designed by our students as well to make sure we were asking the right kind of questions. We wanted to include the students in our analysis as well, to have them as part of the lens, but they were not able to be involved. So that's something we will do next time, to have participation for students in analysing the student data. I'm just finishing, Christine, 20 seconds. Our main findings of the qualitative work was evidence-based practice is my business. I mightn't have thought that was the case, but it's actually, as a student nurse, I can be a leading active agent of evidence-based practice, and it's not something I should be passive in. I can actually make this happen in real time in the ward with my patients. That leads to the second thing, which was around students telling us that their knowledge actually improved the care of their patients. So we had people talking about how they optimize care for a patient with delirium, for example, was one of the stories, because they didn't know the things they could do to improve delirium. Another one was about patients with Parkinson's disease and finding out that they needed to get these medications in a very certain time that wasn't always well communicated. And then the final one was EBP, of course, improved academic and professional development. And I think that leads nicely on in terms of professional development to Christine, who's going to talk about engagement through our internships.
Thanks ever so much, Gary. So you can see from that the huge amount of work that goes into the co-design of this module with students. And I have put the Twitter handle into the chat for everybody, just to see how much engagement does go on with the students, literally on their weekends, when they're out and about doing self-care activities. They're all referring to the EBN module, which is absolutely fabulous, because they've had such a key engagement with it right from the beginning. But one of the things that we're actually seeing is the sustainability of the co-design process with the students, that they are now moving into research internships, which, as Gary said earlier, he's set up through the Degree Plus pathway. So each of these, so a lot of the EBN champions are moving on now to engage with us on a number of other scholarly and research activities across the school. And in fact, we have one of our students who started off as an EBN champion, Steph Craig, who is now a PhD student with us. And she has definitely come through that pathway where she was enthused by the EBN sort of excitement that was generated by Gary. She then engaged with us in a dementia program, evaluating the Dementia Friends program that we run in the school, again with Gary. And then she was so as a result of that, she came on to a funded project with us to develop a dementia game. And now she's actually leading a project as a PhD student to look at dementia-friendly communities. So it's very exciting to really see that development. And as you can see it also from these photos, that many of our EBN students have gone on to receive awards. They've actually worked with us on our kids' dementia game, and they're actually looking, working at a range of different co-design projects with us. So I think that was my time, was it? Tracy, no?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Christine.
Yeah, sorry. You've got a very small, very, very quiet voice. So, so I'll just end with thanking everybody and thanking Gary really for all his work. And if anyone wants any more information around the co-design and how we actually embed co-design now across a lot of our work, we'd be very happy to speak with you in more detail.
Thank you. So we've had our 3 presentations now. We do have a few minutes for questions. I don't know if anybody would like to kick off questions for either Jen, Maryam and Kiva, or Gary and Christine. Eileen, I did wonder if you'd want to come in with one.
Hi there. Jen, that was a really interesting presentation. I'm involved in the science shop here at Queen's, and in the past we had worked with some other projects at your university, and I suppose the thing that interests me most is your level of involvement in quality control of the project outcomes. So I can see that if a student has received 65% or above, that they're then invited to send their project outcome on to the organisation. And I assume you have a level of quality control over the ones that you feature on the website. But I'm interested, I've read projects from our students who do similar kinds of things, which have certainly received 65% as an academic mark, and they are a good academic project. But there are maybe elements of them that I wouldn't be quite comfortable coming into the public domain, and I suspect the organisation wouldn't be quite comfortable putting into the public domain. Is it that the organisations have the final say on that, and what is your role in that quality control process?
That's a great question, Eileen. Thank you. It varies hugely, to be honest, and it's certainly one of the things that's become more apparent as some of the projects have broadened in their scope. So we started off working with Corridor Manchester, where the projects were very kind of classically sustainability orientated, and actually as the projects have become more SDG related, my big worry was around ethics as well, to be honest, and to extend that point. At the moment, I'm engaging with all of the projects that come in, so all of the reports that come through, in part because I love this model. I think I'm a bit of a geek and I really enjoy engaging with students' work. And I have a discussion with all of our partners of the nature of the work that they are looking for. Whenever this model is dropped into a course as the predominant assessment, or actually we're using the Living Lab as the main part of the assessment, I always recommend that the output is in a report format, which I think focuses students on writing in a way that professional organisations will be looking for. And again, it's a skill within itself. Touching wood, until now, I've not had any problems and not actually ever had to pull work. Often there's been cases where work hasn't been used. It's been sent on to organisations. Maybe somebody has moved on from a post, but the way in which the lab is structured, it's no lose in that respect. So it's not as though an organisation says, we must have this research done, we need it for this time. It's literally students are doing this assessment anyway. It's marked as part of their degree. It meets those intended learning outcomes. If it can then be used by the organisation, then that's an even greater boost in that respect. Don't get me wrong, more savvy students will link or will suss out who set the project from an organisation, will get in touch with them. I'm sorry, I'm taking up too much time, but that's where the research can then be shaped a little bit more. But then that's the onus then on the organisation if they'd like to give that additional time that's there as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I suppose I had a similar question that I think touches on all of your presentations. So in a partnership model, are there any tensions with stakeholder groups in shaping and how you manage their expectations? Because you've all sort of touched on stakeholders and externals, or people external to the work that you're doing in partnership with your students. So are they an equal partner? And how do you manage the expectations of the students and the external organisation?
That can be really challenging, Claire. Let's not put too fine a point on it, but very worthwhile. So we work with people with dementia, and they are very much equal partners in all that we do, particularly around our dementia work, and also our service users and carers who work very closely with us in the School of Nursing and Midwifery are again very much considered to be equal partners. But different people will have different perceptions, and I think part of our co-design process is that we actually work with people around the same table so that we can work out those tensions at the time, so that we're not actually, one group saying one thing and one group saying the other, and then who makes the decision. But if you actually have everyone around the table, they are able to then work through those tensions and work out solutions at the same time. So we often aim at working at consensus through that experience.
That's a great and very insightful comment. Thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense to me and must have been difficult during lockdown to achieve that. Yeah.
It was more challenging in lockdown, I think, particularly with people with dementia, but certainly our patients and carer group were able to continue the engagement. Yeah. We did actually end up with a final co-design group online with our children and our people with dementia and with our students, and that was challenging, but it worked very well. But I think for some co-design projects, you might need to do different work separately and then bring them together towards the end, which we had to do during lockdown because it was just too much trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, brilliant. Are there any other questions or thoughts? Karen, are you wanting to go in with a question?
I have my raised hand waving here furiously.
Oh, I don't see it. Apologies.
Yeah, Gary. So just wanted to ask you a quick question about student engagement. No doubt with all student cohorts, you'll get those who will volunteer and be engaged in everything possible. How do you encourage those who aren't natural volunteers or natural joiners to become part of what looks to be a sort of fast-moving and engaged group?
That is a good question, and I think we're about out of time. I'm just kidding. It's a really good question, and it's a good question. I think it comes from over time, just working with the students. I suppose we have such a high number. We've seen our highest number of applied to projects this phase. So we had, I think, 35 out of 300 that put their names in the hat, and it was Christine's children's project, and she only had 5 places, and so I just deferred to Christine to judge who was eligible, because we get them to submit a little abstract. But I think we find that students they tend to be quite passionate about a particular area. So we have so many people wanting to do work on dementia. We have so many people wanting to do work on children's. So it just depends. But I think that's a big challenge in bringing them out. I think it's also okay that some students, I think it's okay, and maybe I'm wrong, but some students, doing the module and doing it well and learning is enough, and it's okay. And their sustainability and learning will be captured in subsequent modules in year 2 and year 3. But not everyone needs this. But we do find that having Degree Plus, having previous students, our podcasts feature students who have been in the program and who have outputs. So they've published a blog or published a paper, or we have students who went to a conference in London. They tend to like those profiling things. So the more we kind of profile, I don't want to say ordinary students, because our students really are exceptional that do this. But the more we profile those students and let them see, I think that encourages more. But maybe that's something to think about, Karen, in the future, that we could give a better answer. Is there a right answer? I'm not sure.
I don't think there is. I just one quick follow-up question. Do you feel that over the period of the projects that there has been a cultural change with your students? Are you having to introduce this every year, or does it sort of roll on from one year to the next and students are aware of what's happening and are keen to be involved?
Yeah, we've been running this. This is the fourth time round, and to be honest, it has. Christine will be all embarrassed when I say this, but it has been people like Christine who've been able to drive it at a strategic level within the school. Because I mean, maybe Christine, you've been able to take it and share it with more people, and there's more people engaging with it outside of just me, and I think that makes a difference.
Yeah. And it's part, we've actually embedded it now, Karen, into our education practice research theme. So we actually set up a theme when I first arrived about 4 years ago that actually profiled scholarship and educational research across the school and encouraged our lecturers in education in particular to get involved. And as more students became interested in projects, we we've now embedded student internships into all of our scholarship and educational research projects across the school. So we have sort of a range of things that students can engage with, and we try to engage them with at the very outset as well, so that they can follow the projects through.
I think there's about 40 to 50 degree plus awards that have came through this, so it's quite a significant.
Great.
We think it's quite good.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Karen,
Thank
I
you.
keep seeing your hand going up and down.
I know. I'm just.
No, don't ask another question because we're out of time. So just finally, can I say a big thank you to all of our speakers today? That has been a really fascinating session. We really appreciate your time and your input. It's very much appreciated. A wee reminder that next week, same time, same place, health and wellbeing in the curriculum, 2 p.m. on the 30th of March. And I want to say a big thank you to the people behind the scenes and running this, in particular, Ben, Julio. I don't know if you want to put your cameras on and give everyone a wee wave. It would be nice for people to see that you're there and working away. They're sitting upstairs for me at the moment. So we really, really appreciate it. And of course, Tracy, who has been working very closely, helping deliver the conference this year. So thank you so much. And to the rest of the team who are also have joined us today and have been looking at the chat and answering and asking questions. So next week, health and wellbeing in the curriculum. Thank you so much. And as we say, the recording with the transcripts will be up within about 48 hours. So enjoy the rest of the day in the sun. The students certainly are in the bar below. So take care, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.